Hey, welcome back. We are, it's Monday. We're starting a term of court this week. In Horry, we've got 3 judges. One will be hearing pleas, 2 will start the day off with trials. One will be a felony DUI and the other one will be a murder. As the case in a lot of these recent cases that we brought to trial, in the murder case, there's going to be multiple co-defendants, so it'll actually be several murder defendants, but there's, in this case, one decedent, one person that got killed. But those figures, we talk about all the time, how many pending murders. Sometimes you'll have 2, 3, 4 people involved in a murder case, so it'll list as 4 murders. In truth, there's one person that died. So, and then, sometimes you'll have, it's very unlikely, but you might have one person that killed 2 people, and that would count as 2 murders. So it's a process of keeping up with the system, but we'll try to alert you as to what took place with those cases next week. Last week we had a trial term, which we're going to talk about in just a second, but a lot of these cases pled, and we ended up using the rest of that time for motions on this week's term of court so that we can start closer to Monday instead of Tuesday or Wednesday trying to get the case in. So first up last week was supposed to be Quentin Jean. He was listed there first for murder. He ends up pleading to voluntary manslaughter. Quentin Amon Jean, 38 of Loris, pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter. He received a sentence of 20 years in prison. This was a 2022 case, so it's 2.5 years old. Occurred in Myrtle Beach. It appears to be a drug deal that went bad. The victim was from out of town, and obviously, he was actually from Parkersburg, West Virginia. That was Joshua Wilson. He was 40 years old. Myrtle Beach Police did a really good job, but that's what they took from that it was actually what we call a drug rip. One was trying to buy drugs and either didn't want to pay, or the other one was selling drugs and didn't want to give up the drugs. But unfortunately, and I repeat this over and over and over, if you are in town buying or selling drugs, your likelihood of being involved in a robbery goes way, way, way up. And if that goes up, your likelihood of being shot or shooting goes way, way up. Drug selling, drug buying is an inherently dangerous pastime here, and at least the majority of our cases, that's what you have. And then you have some that are tied to gangs, which is ultimately back to drugs. But that's what occurred there, and he has got 20 years. He'll have to spend somewhere around 17 before he comes up for parole. He is 38 years old, so he'll be well into his 50s when he comes up for parole. More drugs in North Myrtle Beach. Lawrence Grant, 36 of North Myrtle Beach, pled guilty to possession with intent to distribute crack cocaine and having a firearm. There you go, right? Every drug seller is going to have a firearm, or he's not going to be in the game long, and that's what heightens this stuff up. He received 10 years. he'll have to serve 85% or 8.5 years before he's eligible for parole. And he was arrested not in the process of selling drugs, but it was a traffic stop, and the police found the narcotics, money, and guns in his backpack. So he was also on the trial roster. Once his case was called, he ends up pleading guilty and received 10 years. This one was a felony DUI. In other words, Nancy Bishop, she's 63 years old, of Little River. She was under the influence of alcohol, got into a wreck, and that wreck ended up killing the victim, Thomas Brown, who was 41. This occurred back on Father's Day 2023, so it's approximately 2 years old, almost 2 years old. And she received a sentence of 10 years. Felony DUI carries anywhere from a mandatory minimum of 1 year, and it carries up to 25 years in prison. Generally, I've been asked multiple times, where does these figures come from? Because they generally range, have a bigger range than a lot of the drug cases do. A lot of times it depends on the facts of the case. It can depend, it's always a different judge, mostly to do with the facts of the case. But there's such a wide range, and you get, and I'm all for it, but everybody says, how about the death penalty? That charge doesn't carry the death penalty. How about 30 or 40 or 50 years? It doesn't carry that. It carries a mandatory minimum of 1. It carries up to 25 years. So 10 years is right in the middle. I've seen at the end of a trial, people, we tried a case, it's been a while ago, but the highest sentence I've seen in that is about 22 years. Sometimes, depending on the facts, you can't get probation for felony DUI, but I've seen toward the lower end of that sentence, and it sort of runs the gamut on those. I wasn't up there for that plea, but I'm sure, just looking at this press release, her age of 63 probably played into that. She will be into her 70s before she is released from prison. She'll have to serve 85% before she's available for parole. It doesn't necessarily mean she'll get parole. And then here's another drug charge from Daquan Wilson from Hemingway. He's not necessarily a local, but you see a lot of this from Florence, from Hemingway, from Tabor City, anything within an hour drive. I would say Hemingway's probably 45 minutes from here. You see a good bit of that. This was a traffic stop on Highway 17 near Conway, where from August of 2024, Horry County Police stopped a vehicle driven by Raquan Wilson, 29, of Hemingway, and placed him under arrest. The officer found plastic baggies, pills inside the driver's door pocket, and that was fentanyl. So he pled guilty to 2 drug charges involving fentanyl and received a 10-year sentence on that charge. Again, drugs, fentanyl, extremely dangerous. Read an article the other day that 42% of pills that are on the black market have fentanyl in those. So, and fentanyl can easily kill people. Here's another fentanyl charge from last week. Alazan Diaz Phillips, 23, of Conway, pled guilty to distribution of fentanyl and possession of a firearm. Ryan Waller handled the case for us. He also received a 10-year sentence. This was a 2024 case, so it wasn't quite 10 years old, but it made its way to the trial roster, and that was 14 grams of fentanyl that he had sold to a confidential informant. Another part of this is sometimes people get in trouble for buying or selling drugs. They have charges against them, and they choose to work for the police. They would put on a wire and they would go out and buy fentanyl from their source. It's that little fish traded for a big fish type thing. So that's how he got called up. Phillips, 23, of Conway, he gets a 10-year sentence, and again he's going to have to serve at least over 7 years before he becomes eligible for parole. But we had several other cases on there. The Stephen Sumter case was continued for some reason. Then 3 out of the top 4 on there, 4 out of the top 5 were guilty pleas. Number 6 was a guilty plea. We dismissed number 7, Darwin Sanchez. That was receiving stolen goods, $2,000 to $10,000. Then we had 2 more guilty pleas for 8 and 9. Number 10 was continued. Number 11 failed to appear, which means case is called, they did not show up. The judge would issue a bench warrant, an arrest warrant from the bench, and when Melissa Pauley is picked up, she will be held until her case is brought to trial. Jose Ozuna also was a guilty plea. He received a 5-year sentence, and that was in cocaine, trafficking in cocaine. So quite a bit got taken care of last week. A lot's going to happen again this week. For us, I would suggest that the murder trial will catch and will take the most of the week, but a lot of the cases that are directly under that will probably end up pleading guilty. There's another trial case that's going forward, and if that catches the felony DUI, then some of those other ones will end up pleading guilty. But we will be back here next Monday and alert you to what went on this week in court. And I think Georgetown is also gearing up for a trial week. So it's a busy week to start the spring, but there will be a lot of people that are with us this week, but we'll be off to the Department of Corrections next week, and we'll be back to let you know all about them.